Good evening. I think we're going to go ahead and get started because we want to be respectful of your time and of the speakers as well. So first of all, we'd like to say thank you, and we're honored that you're here this evening and choosing to spend this time with us to learn some things, hopefully, for you and your kids and our community. So my name is Claudia Kasten, and I'm chair of Stand Strong. We're a community-based coalition dedicated to the prevention of underage drinking and substance abuse by youth at Stevenson High School and the feeder middle schools. The idea behind a drug-free coalition is to engage all sectors of the community to become active and to work together to create an environment that supports our youth in their efforts to remain drug-free. We work with all sectors: law enforcement, government officials, civic groups, schools, medical professionals, youth, religious leaders, business leaders, experts in substance abuse, and most importantly, parents. And it's this last sector, parents, that we are in need of. In order for our coalition to work, we need your input and your support. Stand Strong relies on the work of volunteers for our 5 active working committees. First, let's talk about our alcohol committee. We work on promoting social host laws as well as educating the risks and consequences of underage drinking. The marijuana committee, working really hard on educating lawmakers and community members on what legalization might mean to our community. Our prescription drug committee promotes safe storage and disposal of prescription drugs. And then our marketing committee, which works on promoting Stand Strong, recruiting new members, and getting our information out into the community. And finally, our evaluation committee, which creates surveys, analyzes them, and provides information to the community based on those. These committees meet monthly, and they really could use your help. If you're interested in joining one of them, be happy to speak with you after today's presenter, or you could also speak with any of the other members of Stand Strong. You can look in your packet. There's a brochure that gives also an email address where you can reach us, or perhaps just show up at our next meeting. In addition, we have some really important meetings coming up. On October 12th, we're going to have a follow-up talk to Dr. Bradley's presentation this evening with our own parenting expert, Dr. Christina Cortese. That meeting will be at 11 in the Lincolnshire Village Hall. And speaking of Dr. Cortese, she's also hosting a parenting class for Stand Strong through PrEP in the month of October. This is a 3-evening course which focuses every time, which focuses on parenting through these teen years with emphasis on how to get your teens through alcohol and drug-free. If you like this talk, you're really going to be happy. Go to District 125 website and go to the PrEP page. Finally, on November 8th, Dr. Sirota, who is here this evening, will be presenting on vaping. What is it and why should we be concerned? That meeting will take place at 7 p.m. in the evening. All these meetings are at the Lincolnshire Village Hall, and I just want you to know that this was nothing special for you. Every time I get up and address, I knock a bottle of water off. By trade, I'm an attorney, and I learned, like when I had witnesses on the stand, to take their water cups away, because I had one who actually knocked one into the jury box, and there wasn't much I could do other than say I didn't plan that, and I'm really sorry. So it's kind of a thing for me, water. I had 4 kids. What can I say? So again, thank you for being here. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Emmeline Chung. Emmeline is a member of the Catalyst Club Executive Board. She serves as a leader of the Parent Outreach Committee. She's active on the Marijuana Education Committee, and she was selected and attended a National Leadership week-long conference in Orlando, Florida. And Emmeline is one of the outstanding Stevenson Catalyst students. So welcome her.
Hello, my name is Emmeline Chung, and I'm from the Catalyst Club at Stevenson. Catalyst is the youth sector of Stand Strong, and we are a club that focuses on substance use prevention and educating those around us on why youth specifically should lead drug-free lifestyles. We have done many different kinds of work, such as advocating for our cause to our communities and our schools, and all the way to changing policies to get to the root of the issue to solve it. We hope to make a difference in the lives of the youth around us so that they may be able to make educated and encouraged they may be able to be encouraged and educated to make the best decisions for themselves. Now for the main event. Dr. Michael Bradley grew up in Philadelphia where, as he says, he barely survived his own adolescence. Like so many teens, his path to his passion found many detours. He was an officer in the U.S. Army, a disc jockey, and a law student before fate landed him in a job working with teenagers, a job he never dreamed he'd love. That experience caused him to switch studies to psychology, eventually earning his doctorate at Temple University. In the 30 years since, Dr. Bradley has worked with all kinds of teens in all kinds of places to include schools, prisons, and community programs. In addition to being a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Bradley holds specialized certification in the treatment of substance abuse and trauma disorders, and is a diplomat and fellow of American Board of Forensic Examiners. His publications include numerous articles and 5 books. The best-selling Yes, Your Teen is Crazy, Loving Your Kid Without Losing Your Mind. Yes, Your Parents Are Crazy, A Teen Survival Guide.
Fair is fair. Sorry, again.
The Heart and Soul of the Next Generation. When Things Get Crazy with Your Teen, The Why, The How, The What to Do Now. And Crazy Stressed, Saving Today's Overwhelmed Teens with Love, Laughter, and the Science of Resilience. Beyond all of that, Dr. Bradley maintains that his best credential is having parented 2 new millennial teens into young adulthood and having lived to tell the tale. Now here to speak on behalf of Stand Strong and Catalyst, please join me in welcoming award-winning psychologist Dr. Michael Bradley.
Emily, great job. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I feel like I'm following the Rolling Stones on stage now, you know? It's really well done. I am Mike Bradley, and we are here to talk about raising teenagers tonight and to talk about why one of the big factors we've discovered, we're seeing so many crises today with teenagers we didn't see before. However, before we get into that, I wanted to find out who you guys are in terms of where you are in the parenting gig in the service we used to call it service stripes. So see what your experience level is. Who here has their eldest child, age 25 or over? Can I get a show of hands? Cool. I'll call on you for some witnessing for folks that are feeling a little scared. And who here, eldest child, excuse me, is 18 to 24? Okay. Eldest child, 13 to 17? Boy, that brings them out, doesn't it? Yeah. Anybody we didn't get to yet? Do we have anybody that is here with children younger than 13? Uh-oh, we got some newbies. You guys want to tell them, or should I tell them? No? Look, if you guys want to leave, I fully understand. The veterans would tell you some things you don't want to know about, like there's nothing you can do anyway. But okay, well, I'll give you a tip that the veterans always give the new folks, which is about parent karma. Be very, very careful, because raising a child up to adolescence is really easy. I know some kids are challenging. We have a special needs daughter ourselves, but it ain't nothing like the teen years, right? Because you're kind of bumbling along and everything's great. The kids kind of do what you tell them to do before they're teenagers. Did you know that? And they think you know stuff. They may think you're funny, even a little athletic, all that. Yeah, they do. And your best friends, particularly mothers and daughters. Mothers and daughters, most powerful relationship on the face of the planet. I tell you that because I always see these tear-tracked faces of some of the moms coming in the door. It's okay, you have lots of company. Mothers and daughters are closer when they're younger, and they're closer when they're older, but you pay unholy dues for that closeness by being together with a teenage daughter for those years. Just to let you know, it's really, really rough. In any event, so it's usually mother and daughter and your best buddies, you're 8, 9, 10. You guys go out and get matching outfits, You got the lunch together and everything's so cool and you think you got this licked, and one day you come home and your neighbor is on her front yard with her 15-year-old daughter who is screaming and cursing and hurling lawn ornaments at mom. And the new parents, if you haven't been down this road, are tempted to think a thought you should not think. And what is that thought? My daughter would never talk to me like that. Don't do that. Light a candle, say a prayer, whatever you do. Do not judge, because you don't know until you get through the teen years at least once, maybe twice, how bad it can get. So there's your first tip. As you heard, one of my former abbreviated careers was as an officer in the Army, and I've kept in contact with the military in different ways over the years. I feel I owe them a debt of obligation because I resigned my commission. I was finished. But I felt it was unfair advertising. You know, the brochure that got me into that, this guy looked so cool. He was tan, his uniform was immaculate, he was all fit, it looked great. I said, yeah, I want to do that. They don't show you the pictures in the brochure about 2 or 3 days of mucking through swamps, and it's hot, and you're sweaty, and you're miserable. And you know, there's people that get so angry, they shoot at you. Did you know that? They do. It's nowhere in the brochure. I checked it out, but in any event. So I stay in touch with the vets, the doctors, and I do some cases for them. And one of the specialties that I have, because one of my degrees and areas of research is in trauma. So I'll work with veterans that have been traumatized. And everybody knows about that, right? These women and men go through terrible times, you know, explosions, and they get shot, and horrible things happen. So they have something called PTSD, which causes all sorts of problems. It's like a scarring on part of the brain that makes the brain produce things like anxiety, depression, and suicide. And it's really, really serious stuff. So we worked with those guys. When I say guys, by the way, I'm talking about men and women. We worked with those folks for a long time, and then we began to see something weird, which a lot of these folks, military, coming back from deployments, were having PTSD. They were showing the symptoms. They never heard a shot fired in anger. Most people never do in the military. Never heard a shot fired in anger, but there were the same symptoms. What the heck was that? So we started doing research, and it turns out there's another form of PTSD called complex type, just brand new. First year it's been in the diagnostic manual. It's actually in the ICD manual in case you're in the business. It will be in the DSM, the American version, the next time they publish it. Complex type, what is that? Turns out you can get PTSD from what we call the drip, drip, drip of daily stress. So folks that are deployed in hostile areas have this daily stress. They don't get blown up, they don't actually hear a firefight, but they worry about it all the time. They're always kind of on edge, and they're very close to it, and they hear the stories, and they see they see the evidence of awful things happening to people. They're in a hostile land. They're getting really a lot of dirty looks. They feel exposed. They're away from their families. They have no support. They're usually broke. Most of them have terrible financial problems because we don't pay them anything. So it's a whole series of things that come together that stress them on a daily basis. People don't think about that when they think of PTSD, but in fact, that is probably causing more PTSD than the explosions and the firefights. Just numerically, we're seeing that. Why am I telling you this? As I did this for a little while, I could sort of spot it in their eyes. It's an arrogance. When you get to my age, you can sort of quickly pick up cues that aren't really in the literature, but I could just kind of see it. When you talk to one of these folks for a few minutes, I'm thinking, you know, this is a PTSD situation. I'm telling you all that because, guys, over the past couple of decades, I'm seeing the same look increasingly in your children's eyes, in the eyes of teenagers today. Now, if you think that that's a stretch, we have the statistics that show that teenagers and PTSD veterans are suffering at about the same rates, veterans in general coming back from deployments, that the rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide have exploded among both populations. So then we began to say, what is going on in terms of stressing teenagers to the point where they would be reacting like people that were deployed in the military? we've researched this, and in doing the research, we also came up with another puzzle piece, which was some people, they would be side by side, shoulder to shoulder. They go through a horrific event in Afghanistan or whatever, and then they come home, and one is fine. One seems to just go back to civilian life, and they're cool, and the other one can't function. They're disabled, terrible anxiety, depression, and again, suicide attempts. And we're figuring out what the heck is the difference between these folks. And we came up with what we think is the magic concept for both veterans and for teenagers as well. A story of two of these vets can make the point clear to you. Excuse me. I had two cases over a couple of years of traumatic injuries, traumatic amputations, people that lost limbs. And one of them was sort of predictable. A guy lost his leg, I think his was the right leg. And they called me up and said, you know, we got this guy, he won't get out of bed. He won't see anybody in his family, won't see his fiance. He's promised to kill himself at the first opportunity. He will not do any physical therapy. The guy was a carpenter. He says his life is over, he can't work anymore, he's done. Well, that sort of makes sense, right? I mean, if I was in his situation, that's probably how I would react. Be like, my life is over, I'm just not the same person. Then I got a call like 18 months later. They say, we got another traumatic amputee. It was the other leg. And I said, oh, he won't get out of bed, right? They said, no, get this. We can't keep him in bed. When they tell him to do 10 reps of physical therapy, he does 20 or 30. He won't take prescribed bed rest. He won't do any painkillers. And the kicker was, and they wanted me to talk him out of this request, he was insisting on a runner's prosthetic. You all know about the false legs and so forth? Well, anybody that loses a leg and has to learn to walk on just a regular prosthetic device, just walking is an amazing thing. It is so freaking hard. It takes an incredible amount of work. Running? You got to be kidding me. That's like amazing. Well, this guy used to be a runner, and he's having nothing of walking. He's going straight to running. And they won't let him, so he's fighting, he's raising hell. The most important piece of information I learned about the second guy was that he rarely stayed in bed. He was up roaming the halls. He would greet the new vets coming in that were injured. He started self-help groups all on his own, getting people together. His family was in all the time. So I went to see him and was talking to him, and he said that he wanted me, as a psychologist, to talk them, the docs, into giving him the runner's prosthetic and so forth. So I let him talk, and I said, look, do you mind if I ask you a question? And he said, I know what you're going to ask. I know you're one of those shrinks. You're going to tell me that I'm not facing up to my pain, right? You think I'm doing this as a way of avoiding my pain. I said, well, a question did pop in my head. And he said, that ain't it. He said, man, I feel the pain. He said, not to get too gross, but he said, I wake up in the middle of the night puking from pain in a leg I don't have anymore. It's something called phantom pain. They get intense pain from a non-existent limb. He said, I get that. He said, I was scared. I am scared. I'm terrified all the time. I'll cry, absolutely. But I gave that frickin' war my leg. I'm not giving it another inch of my life. So if you want to help me, you talk that orthopedic guy into getting me the runner's prosthetic, and you get the VA guy in here because I want to hear about going to law school, and I want my benefits and blah, blah, blah. What was the difference between those two veterans? Same horrific injury, same terrible stress from having to make that adjustment in life. The difference is something called resilience. Resilience. And that's the magic I'm here to talk a little bit about tonight for both veterans, but that's not why we're here, but for your teens. Because guys, and it sounds dramatic, but I can make the case, I see your kids as in a war. They are deployed. They're in a hostile environment that is coming after them. They don't really know it. They don't even have the cognition because they've grown up in this environment. It is coming after them, and it is costing them in terms of the rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. So what is resilience? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not the John Wayne thing, and I know that's a dated metaphor these days, but it's not, Joe Cool, he never gets scared, never gets upset, doesn't feel pain, shrugs off all the stress, all that stuff. That's not true, by the way. Everybody gets scared in terrible situations. How you respond to the fear is different. Anybody tells you they're not scared in a bad situation is either really crazy or they're lying. People are terrified, scared. They should be. That's natural. It's the way we are wired. So it's not that weird ability. It is actually an ability to rebound from terrible stress, injury, fear, trauma. It's a specific set of skills and assets that we've discovered that come together to give people this magical power. You could think of it as emotional martial arts, if you will. It's a way of handling what will come at you in life. Doesn't mean you avoid it, and it doesn't mean somehow you don't feel the bad feelings. It means you're able to rebound. The metaphor I use is you think about those two vets as ships on an ocean, speaking of hurricanes and such, and a monster wave overwhelms those two boats, and they both go down. They're damaged. They're like, wow, this is scary. They may go all the way down. One does go down. It keeps going down. The other one somehow bobs to the surface. So if you think about emotional buoyancy, that's sort of the key. It's an emotional buoyancy. It can be described as the vaccine to stress, to the killer kind of stress. And we'll talk about stress a little bit because that's misunderstood as well. The good news, the great news about resilience is it is not a genetic tendency. People thought, well, it gets handed down in the genes, right? The old man was resilient, his grandfather was resilient, mom's resilient. It's not like that. It turns out that some parents are good naturally at teaching resilience without even thinking about it, but we haven't developed a genetic resilience gene. That's great news because we can teach it. We can foster it as parents, as educators, as interveners from early ages, helping to build those sets of skills that can give them these skills that they need. Before I get to all that, I've got to clear a couple of points of business. That was my fault that the water got knocked over. I had taken the lid off and laid it there as a booby trap. Sorry about that. That's stress. Yeah, right. This tie is, in fact, the ugliest tie you've ever seen in your life. Anybody see the characters on there? If you were here this morning, you're not allowed to answer any questions. Anybody see the characters? Yeah, Rocky and Bullwinkle, right, Moose and Squirrel. So what's the tie about? When my son went through that time when I had the massive stroke, I don't know if you heard about that. My son and I were like really close. When he was younger, he used to think I was sort of funny. He thought I was sort of smart. I was even athletic back in the day, really. And you know, he thought I was something. And then I had this massive stroke nobody told me about. Because I came down to the breakfast table one morning when he was like 12, turning 13, and suddenly I was the dumbest human being on the face of the planet, right? Oh, you've had the same stroke. Yeah, I get that, right. I'm like, what's up, Ross? And he's grunting. He won't talk anymore. And I go, and I notice he's all dressed in black, and he won't smile, except to snicker if I say something wrong. He would correct my grammar in social settings. I'm not making this up. He would, oh, that's not the way you say that. One of those things. Anyway, we have these big Christmas gatherings in my family, and you know, we do the one present for everybody, and Ross volunteered to get my present. And he gave me this tie in front of the family and talked about how he had scoured the whole city of Philadelphia to try to find a tie that would capture the old man's taste in clothing. And everybody laughed at my expense, but don't feel bad for me. Ever since, I wear it everywhere I go. I was on the Today Show, and the guy said, you know, Dr. Bradley, your tie's giving the camera a problem, you know, with all this stuff. I said, yeah, I know. My son Ross picked this out for me. Isn't this a great tie? You can't beat them anymore. They passed this law, they tell me. But sarcasm is sort of a nice fill-in, you know. You can, so in any event. So that's the tie. And the water tragedy, I apologize, the voice is a little thin. I've been doing a fair amount of speaking, but I will get through the evening, my daughter's comments notwithstanding. Sarah is our adopted daughter. Sarah, no joke, has PTSD, and it's probably the real reason I got into that business. She was our foster child. We're foster parents back home. And she came to us when she was a year old, And we were her 5th placement in the first year of life. I'm not making that up. She was born amphetamine and opioid addicted, dual addictions, premature, just a horrendous situation. And she was returned by these foster homes as being unmanageable because all she could do was scream. She was abused in one of them and starved. She was not even on the charts for weight and height. She looked like a child coming from a starving nation somewhere. It's unbelievable. So, and she's had struggles with that because of the trauma all her life. In any event, whenever I would travel, I was getting on an airplane in particular, would freak her out. Loss of family again. Imagine a baby losing 4 families. I mean, it's all about attaching to the adults, to the parents in that critical first year. In any event, so she would get weird. And I would always snuggle her down to sleep nights before I would leave. And one time I was snuggling her down, and sure enough, she turned to me and said, "Daddy, are you going to die soon?" And I'm thinking, there's her trauma, all the news about terrorism, whatever the latest blow-up was, and all that stuff. And I said, "Sweetheart, I don't think I'm going to die soon, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to keep that from happening, okay?" She said, "All right, Daddy." And then I asked the question, bridge too far question. I said, "Sarah, can I ask you why you asked me if I was going to die soon?" She said, and I quote, "Well, Dad, geez, because just like, look at you." I'm not making that up. Another tip, be very careful what you ask your teenager. They think you want to know the truth, see? So think about your questions. So assuming her predictions are incorrect, we will get through the evening, hopefully. I'm going to try to get you to see this from my perspective by going over 4 points. The first is to chat a bit about the brain inside your teenager's head. Yes, there is a brain there. No, it may not be the brain for which you had hoped, because teen brains have specific neurologic challenges that we'll go over that explain a lot of the things that make you crazy, that they do things that just seem to make no sense at all. By the way, the teenagers themselves know this makes no sense. They feel crazy. That's where the crazy title of the book came from. The first, if you notice, crazy is in the title of most of my books. That's because kids in groups that I worked with would say, when they're honest, "I think I'm nuts. There's something wrong with me. My brain doesn't work." And the parents would always agree, by the way. There's something wrong with them. So that I think you'll find interesting. Second, oh, by the way, that wiring is actually sort of designed to be anti-resilience when you look at it, when we pull it apart. It's the way the brain works that actually can cripple resilience unless you respond well. Second is a world around our kids. Guys, that world truly qualifies for the term crazy. It is not the world you remember. If you are a younger parent and you think you know what it's like to be a teenager today, disabuse yourself of that notion, because that will cripple you. You do not. I don't. Stuff changes so fast in the world of adolescence, I'm constantly stunned. Like, what? I never heard about that before. So it's a much better position for you to, when your kid says you don't understand what it's like to be a teenager, say, "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. Tell me about it. Educate me." It's a point of respect for their experience. Would you go into a third world nation and say, "Oh, I know what your lives are like. You know what your problem is, your blah, blah." Good luck with that. If you go in and say, "Look, I know nothing about your world, your culture. Would you tell me?" then people are more inclined to share because you're showing respect, not arrogance. Works with teenagers as well. The world, as you'll see, is also set up as an anti-resilience plot to really bring these kids down. Another piece of the puzzle. Then third, hopefully we'll get to the empowering thing where we talk about what you can do to respond. In the military, we always talk about the terms of the plan of mission, strategies, and tactics. What the heck are you trying to do? And then overall goals of how to get that mission done. And then tactics, day to day to day. If this happens, do that. If that happens, do this. So I'm going to equip you with some strategies and tactics to help you accomplish the mission of building the resilience in your kid. Fourth part will be the best, which is your questions and answers. my answers, hopefully, your questions, although you guys often walk in the door with answers I didn't think of, and that's why I still do this touring at this ripe old age. Everywhere I go, I get another nugget. Somebody says something, I'm thinking, man, that's genius. I'm going to steal that and write about it in the next book. So Q&A, a couple of rules on Q&A. One, I am Irish by birth, not by choice. In my family, Q&A stands for quarrels and arguments. If you want to disagree and disagree in a judgmental way, call me names, say that's stupid, where'd you get that, where's your degree from, Sears, whatever, feel free. I won't be homesick. That's the way they talk to me at home. Disagreement usually means I'm not speaking clearly or you know something I don't. So please disagree. Second rule about Q&A, contrary to the myth, there is such a thing as a dumb question. You all know what the dumb question is? It's the one you don't ask. That's dumb in every sense of the word. Do not leave your questions go unanswered. If we don't get to them tonight, you can write me or just go on the web. There's lots of great information out there on parenting. So pursue your questions. They're very important. And I do answer the emails that I get eventually. I will get back to you. Okay, so what's the first thing that's killing kids' resistance? Their own brains. Their own brains. What's going on? The short course on teen neurology is that their brains are being transformed from being child brains to adult brains, which is just an amazing thing when you study it. It's just like, oh my God, when you look at this stuff. The problem is, whoever came up with the design, Mother Nature, God, whatever your belief system is, has a sense of humor. And I think she's female. Because what she does is she starts at the back of the brain and works forward. And what's in the back of the brain is a set of circuits that I call the child brain. You've heard it called the animal brain or the emotional brain, the monkey brain in Eastern philosophy, all that stuff. Whatever. It operates like a 4-year-old, except a 4-year-old on steroids, because the back of the brain is where sex drive is, risk taking, that excitement of doing really crazy things that make absolutely no sense, the drugs, sex, and rock and roll, all that stuff. It's all in the back of the head in this kind of burgeoning adult. What gets wired in last? The prefrontal cortex, which I call the adult brain. What's the adult brain? That's the smart brain. It thinks. It can remember the past. It can think about the future. It makes really smart decisions. But the back of the brain calls the shots in the first couple of years of adolescence, and slowly the front brain gets wired in. We all have that situation, right? You ever argue with yourself about something you should do and don't feel like doing? Yeah, taxes, laundry, coming home to face your wife after you're out all night the night before, all that kind of stuff, yeah. But you argue back and forth, and hopefully your adult brain makes the decision. But teenagers are driven by the child brain. You guys have forgotten this. See, when you leave here tonight, some jerk cuts you off, and the back of your brain fires up. I know you're going to pretend this doesn't happen, but it does. The back of your brain fires up and says, I know what I should do. I'm going to race up on his rear end. Yeah, high beams. Yeah, get him with high beams. Let's race around them and then stomp on our brakes. That's a good idea. Yeah, cool. Let's throw them fingers. Well, all those impulses are there. You think they're not, and you may have disciplined yourself to not hear them, but they're there. If I put you in the brain scan machine, we see the back of the head light up when that jerk cuts you off. Those impulses get rooted to the front brain, adult brain, and your adult brain says, wait a minute, think about it. You know the guy's crazy. He's likely got a gun, might be drunk. Do you want to die over 10 feet of asphalt? Is that the way you want to check out? Oh, no, I guess not. And then you do the right thing and you back off, hopefully, and on your way. Kids get the first part, the fire up. They don't have the second in early adolescence, which leads you, when your kid does something bizarre, to ask the dumbest question in the world. What is it you ask your kid when they do something really nuts? What were you thinking? Yeah. Why did you do that? And what does the honest kid say? I don't know. I don't know. They shake their heads if they're honest. Usually what they'll do is start a fight with you about something else as a sidebar diversion, you know, the press conference kind of trick. But it's, yeah, but the honest answer is, I don't know. And they'll tell their shrink, I'm crazy. There's something wrong with me. I can't explain why I did it. It's all about front brain, back brain. Play for time, because the front brain starts to wire in, but getting there can be tricky. How do you know this development process has started? Because it starts almost like a switch flips. Like a switch flips. And that's where you get this radical departure of behavior in your teenager. By the way, when does it start? It used to be 14, sometimes 13. Now it's 13, sometimes 12, and 11 in the females. Girls are starting this development process ahead of the males, about 12 to 18 months, which is really stunning, and explains a few things. By the way, veteran parents, which would you say are harder to raise, boys or girls? What would you say? Exactly, yeah. The research, 92% of parents who raised both said the girls were a lot harder. I was part of that. I interviewed this one dad. They said, which was harder? And the dad said, well, let me think. My son was 14. He was a maniac. He used to punch holes in the wall, kick the door off the jam one time. And our daughter turned 14 after that, and man, did we miss our son. Why is that? Boys are not as smart. Sorry, gentlemen, it's just true. They're not. The girls are better at social emotional stuff. Sorry, ladies, the girls are better manipulators, particularly in teen years. They're great. They can lie great. I've been doing this forever. And boys never snow me, hardly ever. The girls snow me all the time. They'll tell me what a bitch you are as her mother, and by the end of the session, get your mother in here. I'm going to talk to her, They're really, really good at it. It's just a skill. Sorry, it's true. It actually is a positive skill, because as you've noticed, when there's a crisis, the women always work together. Women form groups, committees, and the males are all about, I'm going to get on my horse as a solo warrior, and I'm going to take care of business. We're much more powerful as a committee than as an individual, teamwork and all that. So it's a developmental thing, but getting there can be helped. So boys will have these explosions. In conflict, we see the big difference. Boys will go nuts, King Kong, then a half hour later they'll come downstairs and they'll say, I'm really, really pissed off at you. I just can't remember why. I don't know what it was. It was, but I really hate you. I'll let you know what it was. I forget. Girls can hold grudges for a week. Did you know that? Yeah, girls cannot talk to their moms for several days. Boys can't resist the urge to explode or do something. They're just too ADHD. Girls will plot against their mothers. They'll call up your in-laws. You know what she did to me? Daddy, Mom's being mean to me. Put your mother on the phone. That doesn't work out so good. In any event, they will do that. I had a mother, I was doing the seminar. She said, you want to hear a difference between girls and boys? She had a fight with her daughter, and she noticed the daughter seemed to get over the fight very quickly. And she said, gee, my daughter's growing up, and Mom went off to work. Forget what she did, but she had to dress up for work, right? Clothes are really important. She comes home and goes upstairs to get into her comfy clothes and finds that in her shoe rack, every left shoe was missing. Think about that for a minute. What boy would think that you could crush a woman by stealing one of her shoes? Really, right? Because the guys are all staring at me, but the women get it. They're like, oh my God, that's like a capital punishment thing. She should be locked up. Really, isn't that amazing? Just smile sweetly and then devastate her with, anyway, so go after the shoes. So how does it start? It typically starts with an explosion of emotion. Mood instability, and I've heard this story so many times from moms around the world, that your previously stable, calm, reliable daughter is in front of her pantry, your pantry, in early adolescence, and you've got, what, $5,000 worth of food in the pantry? And you're in the next room and you hear her cursing. You've never heard her curse before. You didn't think she knew those words, right? And she's banging things and stomping her feet and throwing cans on the floor, and she's saying, you've heard this before, right? There's nothing to eat. And you're dumb enough to rush in and get involved in that conversation because this is your first kid. The veterans say, just don't go in, just let it go. But you rush in and you're there, honey, of course there's stuff to eat. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's wrong. You always buy food for my creepy little brother. No, there's lots of stuff here for you. There's nothing here for me. Well, just take it easy. We'll find something. Oh, we got tuna fish. You love tuna fish. I'll make you a nice bowl of tuna fish. What do you say? I don't kill living creatures to sustain myself. So, well, you killed a hell of a lot of them last week. That was last week. I'm a militant vegan today. Okay, look, I respect that. That's cool. It's hard work. Let me see what we got. Got pasta. Vegan pasta. Look at this. It's vegan pasta. I'll make you a nice bowl of pasta. What do you say? Pasta. Pasta. I know what you want. You want me to eat lots of pasta so I'll get fat and I won't have a boyfriend. I hate you. I hate this family. Ah! Stomps off. What are you looking at? As these changes first hit, the neurotransmitters, the chemicals in the brain that help us not go crazy over little things, go on this roller coaster, up and down and up and down. The boys typically turn dark and disappear for a while. They're called into the cave for like a year, but girls tend to act out their angst on the people around them, particularly mom. So that's when you know the game is afoot. They become impulsive. They start to, again, do things they can't explain. But the neurologic explanation, guys, is they value rewards over risks. Value rewards over risks. See, that's what makes you crazy. When you talk to a kid after they did something dumb, you'll say, didn't you know this could happen? And the kid will say, well, yeah. Well, why did you do it? I don't know. It's because in the moment, they're all driven by the child brain. You got that? That's why they'll make you crazy, because you're saying, you know, I gave them all the drug and alcohol education, told them this stuff is stupid, and they're not lying when they take the pledge and they say, yeah, this is dumb, I'll never do that, blah, blah, blah. It's just in the moment, you know, it's Dr. Jekyll becomes Mr. Hyde. They switch to another brain region. They know the risk of these behaviors. It's just they're so driven for the reward. And that's why drugs are so freaking dangerous for teenagers, as we'll talk about. We'll come back to that. Oh, the next thing is their sleep clocks go a little crazy. Have you noticed they tend to stay up late at night? Do you know how many hours of sleep your kid is supposed to be getting? Yeah, 9 to 10. Some need 11, 12. Some can do okay on 7, 8. You know what the average sleep of an American teenager is these days? Yeah, it's under 6. I just saw 5.7 as a big average. Guys, think about that one thing for a minute. What if we cut your sleep, everybody here, we're going to cut your sleep by 1/3. Think about that for a moment. Let's say you get 6 hours because you're busy and you do okay on 6 hours of sleep because you need less as you get older. So we're going to cut your sleep to 4 hours a night. And we're going to come back in 3 months and check out how you're doing. How are you going to be doing sleeping 2/3 of what you were designed to get for a few months? Are you going to be a little ADHD? Going to be a little depressed? Going to be anxious? Are you going to be feeling like you don't want to live anymore? Do you remember newborns in the house? God forbid, I remember that. I remember my eyeballs hurt. And my wife did all the work, but I remember I just wasn't sleeping, and my eyes hurt from the lack of sleep. And I was miserable. You didn't want to know me. That's what happens with teenagers. When I become king of the world, I'm still waiting for the invitation. Rule number 1 will be your kids all get 9 hours of sleep a night. And I'll put half of my industry out of business. A lot, and we don't know the percentage, but a huge part of anxiety, depression, and suicide that we diagnose with teenagers is actually sleep deprivation or sleep insufficiency. They're not sleeping. When we get them sleeping, they do a lot better. They do a hell of a lot better. You know these programs that claim they cure teenagers, kids that have all sorts of problems, and we ship them out to Utah or something, and then the kids come back like they're from West Point. They're all cleaned up and they're bright-eyed and they're saluting, yes sir, and no ma'am, and all that kind of stuff. And everybody says, this is magic. Unbelievable. What a great program. And then we go back 3 months later and evaluate those kids after they've been home. Guess what? They're back to where they used to be. Why do kids get better in residential treatment programs? No screens, lights out, 9 o'clock at night, lights on, 6 in the morning, everybody up, we're going for a run or jog or even a walk, whatever. Wellness, sleep, diet, and exercise. Those are the things that restore sanity to many, many kids. What we're doing now is we are medicating them and therapizing them for things that are really the result of sleep insufficiency. And we're using very powerful medications, and we don't know. I mean, sometimes we have to, absolutely. And I'll be the first one to say, yeah, this kid needs the med. But a lot of times, we don't go the natural route. And once a month, I'll have parents come in and say the kid needs the ADHD medication. And I'll say, well, before we do that, amphetamine sort of thing, which is really what it is, could we try maybe he sleeps 9 hours a night, that he eats something green once in a while, walks around the block, gets some exercise, and the parents glaze over because it's just such a monumental task. They'll go down the street and get the guy to write the script for the pill. Just to let you know, the sleep piece is huge. And if you want to focus on one thing, and if we get time, you could ask me, how do you change it? We'll talk about some of the strategies to do that. Okay. Next thing, the world itself around them, your kid's culture is a stress producer. Before we go further on the concept of stress, guys, understand that stress is a bell curve. Remember those things from back in the day? It's a curve that goes like this. What does that mean? Kids that are excessively stressed have extremely high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal behavior. Kids that are insufficiently stressed have excessive rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal behavior. Almost the same on the two ends of the scale. The sweet spot in the middle, that's our maximum design. That's where the stress is appropriate for the person, and it's like you're in the game. You're like, I don't know if I can win this game. You know, I'm nervous. These guys are really big and really fast, and your parent says, well, you know, maybe you shouldn't play. Hell no, I'm playing. I want to find out. This is really cool. That's an appropriate amount of stress. Not too much, not too little. So stress in excessive and insufficient doses are the problem. It's all about finding that sweet spot. But with the kids who are overstressed, there's two primary causes, and here's where the fights will start with the audience. Excessive expectations and screens, the electronics. We had no frickin' idea what we were doing to kids when we decided screens were a great thing to do. I was part of that. I was like saying, well, what could be the problem? What could possibly go wrong here? Giving kids access to all this information, it seemed like Star Wars at the time. Amazing. They can hit a button and learn stuff that I used to have to research for hours and hours at the library. And getting there was hours and hours. We had no idea. The screens are amazingly stressful because they prompt kids with negative suggestions all the time that do change the way they think. We'll go over that in a second. The second thing that's happening with the expectations, what are the excessive expectations? Talking about sports. Kids who, back in the day, we played sports. I played a little basketball, played a little football. We were awful. By today's standards, I couldn't make your team. Your kids today that are on these teams, they were the college players back in my day, like amazingly good. Nobody had the money for the training camps. Nobody was preparing in soccer camps at age 3 and being ferried around to all the club teams and the travel teams and the sports at school teams and so forth. And then the other one is academics. AP classes, honors classes, enrichment programs. Let's really build these kids up. Guys, kids are not built for that level of stress. Two things are happening, by the way. We're polarizing American teenagers because of these excessive expectations. Parents that have the money and the means and the interest to push their kids into these things are pushing them to an extreme that causes suffering. And parents that can't do it, or kids that can't compete, they're just not skilled, they can't run with the AP kids, they quit. Their heads go down on the desks. And we're seeing this polarization that frightens the heck out of us. We have lost the middle ground. We've lost that sweet spot of stress for teenagers. And we are, in essence, killing them for no good reason. Guys, it's a myth that getting kids into elite colleges assures happiness. What is your mission? What do you want to do? If you think your mission is about getting your kid into an elite college, watch out. I have lots of people that were tracked at early ages to be neurosurgeons. Kids at age 8 were either telling or were told that's what they were going to do, and they did it. They lockstep through it. I also work with adults, and I've known neurosurgeons who wanted to put a bullet through their head. Extremely successful. They just frickin' hate what they did. I also know neurosurgeons who love what they do. I know cops in North Philadelphia who want to shoot themselves because it's a hideous job. And I know cops in North Philadelphia that love their job. It's just where they fit. What's that about? The identity of the child, who they are. You have to figure out who the heck you are, not who your parents want you to be. Those are two different things. And when we start trying to pound round pegs into square holes, we push kids into this excessive stress expectation kind of a venue. And that's a big problem of what's going on. And if you think that assures career success, I came from a conference of CEOs, biggest of the big, and they brought me in to talk about this. And they told me at the end of it why they brought me in, because they noticed that the kids who they hired, young adults, who had struggles in their lives, they went to, God forbid, state schools, had some legal difficulty, but pulled it together, you know, that those kids were very different than the best of the best that they used to hire. They said they used to go after the top 1% of 1%, MIT, Stanford, and so forth. This one guy said, you know, Bradley, I've watched these kids. He had one of the war rooms, you know, the Bloomberg, I guess that's him, the huge room, and the captain of the ship watching this, and there was a crisis. And he said the kid that young person he took a trial on, who had some rough edges, had sleeves rolled up and was engaged in trying to solve the problem. Even though other people were yelling at him, like, you're new, you're a kid, get out of here, he would just go on to the next table and say, what can we do? These folks are doing that, blah, blah, blah. He looked at his best of the best. The APs, the all-state soccer players, they were sitting at their desks, he told me, waiting for the next syllabus. Waiting to be told, memorize this, spit it back up, you get our stamp of approval. Everybody get that? It just was like a lightning bolt for me, that's what we create when we think that these enrichment programs and, you know, making them soccer stars and AP classes is somehow the path. Are some kids suited for that stuff? Absolutely. I call them the West Pointers. But not many folks are meant to be West Pointers. I was not West Point. I knew some, and the guys impressed the hell out of me. But they do live on 4 hours of sleep, but they're smiling. They love the challenge. They're sort of crazy in an amazing way. Not too many people are cut out for that. Most kids are not. So be very careful with the excessive stresses. And I know a lot of you are going to say, look, I'm on your page. My kid won't back off the AP courses because all of her friends are doing the AP courses. And that's all they hear, the pressure that goes on. So people have to think long and hard. What you're doing is robbing time that should be devoted to things where somebody discovers who the hell they are. And that's about freelance. My son never went to an MIT summer enrichment program. He was a musician, heavy metal musician, one of the things he did. And it made a lot of my relatives crazy, like he's brilliant, and he is. Why would you let him do that? And it was hard because I get all these looks from the other parents on the sidelines, you know, because he didn't really care. He just played sports when he liked it. And when the sport became a job, he quit. So I'm not doing it anymore. So why not? So the coach is screaming at us, and he's saying, you know, we got to win. This match is a war. He was yelling at the kids. This is war, and this is our home country, and they're coming into our home country. And he said, that's crazy, Dad. So, you know, it's not fun anymore. I'm done. And he was a great athlete. Kids have to figure out who they are. Again, not who we want them to be or tell them to be. When we overburden them with these activities, they lose the time to navigate the world and learn. Think about how you learned. If you think you're reasonably successful, did you learn by doing everything somebody told you to do, or did you screw up? Another question, what did you learn more from? Your successes or your failures? I don't remember much of my successes, maybe most of them. When we get together, people say, remember you did this, that, and the other? Did? I don't remember that. But boy, I'll tell you about my failures in exquisite detail. I keep them right up here. And I learned from them. I'll never do that again. Learn from them. Didn't kill me, but I'm smarter because of it. Your kids are the same. So what about the screens? The screens are magnifying age-old stressors on kids. Back in the day when you were a teenager, yes, there were urges about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Rock and roll meaning crazy behavior, sexual violence, that kind of stuff, or general violence. They were there. The screens have taken those prompts that were always pressuring teenagers from forever, and they've magnified them. They've potentiated them amazingly. Think about muskets to machine guns. That's what's changed in terms of pounding kids with these suggestions. So, question, do those suggestions change behavior? Can what kids see and what they hear actually influence their behavior? I used to say no, and I lost the great debate. Two stunning examples. The AMA, American Medical Association, did a fabulous study trying to figure out why kids start smoking cigarettes. Kids today don't smoke cigarettes as much as they used to, but they largely try them. They experiment with them. And the AMA was trying to figure out, well, why would they even try? Because they have the data. They know cigarettes are really stupid. Why do they try? And they looked at predictive factors. You know the most powerful way to get a teenager to try cigarette smoking is? It's not parents who smoke, not peers who smoke, it's not socioeconomic class, which it used to be. Today, the most powerful way to get a teenager to pick up a cigarette is show him lots of on-screen smoking by a factor of almost 3. Kids who watch lots of on-screen smoking have 3 times the rate of smoking initiation than kids who do not see those screen figures. That's why a few years ago, there's a big thing about a number of professional organizations were going to sue Hollywood movie producers. If you show people smoking cigarettes, we're going to sue you. You wouldn't win the suit, but it caused such a stink that a lot of movie producers started to cut back images of cigarette smoking. Second, sexual violence against young females has exploded. Just bizarre. Have you seen any of that stuff? You follow the Me Too movement and so forth? It's just exploded. By the way, not to get too depressing, we think that as of the end of next year, the majority of women in America can expect a sexual assault at least once before age 25. Before age 25. And what are the report rates? You know what the percentage is of women who report this stuff? 2 to 7%. 2 to 7. And I was involved in the follow-up on that, saying these are largely college girls who are getting assaulted. And I interviewed one of them who was assaulted, did not file charges. And I said, did this stuff happen? She told me in terrible detail. And I said, can I ask you a question? Why did you not report it? And she said, well, well, I was, drinking. I guess I was drunk, and he was drunk, and I guess I was dressed kind of, sexy, and well, boys are boys. I said, I'm sorry, I don't get that. She said, well, you're a guy, boys will be boys. And I was stunned. It just like arrested me. Where did she decide that this was normal? This was okay? And that gets us back to the screens. Because when we researched girls who are the victims of sexual violence and the boys that perpetrate the violence, guess what we found was the greatest identifying figure? How many lyrics they had listened to, what their music selection was. Have you seen them walking around with the earbuds 24/7? They're getting messages. And kids that listen to music that is provocative sexually, it all is, and misogynist, a lot of it is, and suggests sexual violence, have 2.7 times the rate of being a victim or perpetrator of sexual violence. In other words, guys, what kids see and what they hear very much affects their behavior because the brains are fragile, they're not well regulated, and these things are powerful in terms of the pounding that they get from the screens. The electronics have changed everything. What else is going on? A friend of mine, a woman whose data I steal all the time, and I hate her because she's smarter than me, and one of the things she did that I really resent is that she got this idea to go back and take research from 50 years ago and look at the changes over 50 years with teenagers. Really smart. Kind of tests we've used and questionnaires we've used over 5 decades. See if there's trends. This is what she found out. Her name is Jean Twenge, and so I referenced her name, right? So if you get letters saying, did he mention my name? I did. First, kids feel less control over the outcome of their lives than kids 50 years ago. Does that make any sense to you? Parents are saying, well, that's crazy. Kids have all the money now in this neighborhood. They have all these advantages. They can do anything they want, just anything they want, and I get it for them. And, they can do anything they want in the world. That's not what the kids say. On the questionnaires, kids report life is a crapshoot. It's like, whatever happens, happens. They have this fatalism and pessimism, and we can't figure out exactly where it came from, but we sure as heck measure it. I remember, I grew up in Southwest Philadelphia. We were poor, not starving, it's just one pair of shoes, nobody had a car, that kind of thing. I remember hanging with the guys in the park, and we would talk about, we can get out of the hood. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to, GE was down the street, Westinghouse, they had unions. You could make a decent wage, you could raise kids, maybe even get them through college. You could join the military, you could be a cop. People would talk about this stuff. Yeah, we can do things. There was a positivism, even in poor neighborhoods back then. We've lost that somehow. Second, we used to ask kids, what do you want to do in the world? What's the point of your existence? Back in the day, believe it or not, kids were more idealistic. They would say, I want to make a change, I want to do something important, be a nurse, be a cop, whatever. Join the army and save the world, that sort of stuff. So there was kind of an idealism. Today we ask kids, what's the point of life? You know what they say? The money. He who dies with the most toys wins. 3-car garages, lots of women, exotic cars, party hard and leave a good-looking corpse. This fatalism, the goals are extrinsic. They're outside of themselves, as opposed to looking inside of themselves. Who am I? What do I believe? What do I want to do in the world? Next, they're less spontaneous and inner-directed. Why? Because we structure the hell out of their time. We rush them from one activity to the next. They'll go from school, where they're handed all the syllabi and told what to do, and then they go to practice, and there the coaches are telling them what they do. And then they go to tutoring or enrichment, and the adults tell them what to do. And then they do some homework, and they collapse into bed, and the next morning they get up and start the whole thing over again. Was that the way you grew up? No, I remember being bored. Remember being bored? Oh my God, I'm so bored. If your parent heard you say that, what would they say? I'll find something for you to do. No, I'm fine, I'll figure it out, and you'd head out. Yeah, back in the day, Southwest Philadelphia, it's true, the parents would kick the kids out in the morning and don't come home till dinner time. And I'm not saying that's a safe way to parent kids, but you learn a lot. The dump behind my house was our playground, and I thought it was a cool playground, but I had to navigate that. I had to figure out how to survive, how to handle the gangsters and the crazies and all that stuff, and it really helps. Building resilience, building those skills. You don't get from enrichment programs, music lessons, travel soccer teams. It's not there. It's not there. Finally, they're much less self-reliant. We don't allow them to make decisions, and we don't accept failure. My kid will not fail. When Ross, my genius son, was going through his dark days, he came home one day, sat at the table. My wife and I prize education, and he knows that. And he was, in a gifted program. He's on track to be, Captain AP and all that stuff. And he said, I just want to tell you guys, I do not intend to cooperate with social studies this year. And I said, really? He said, yes, I refuse to participate. I will not take any tests. I'm not doing any assignments. I will not participate. I said, well, why is that? He said, because I have looked at this, and I've discovered social studies is actually a governmental mind control program invented by rich white guys like you, and he points to me, to maintain their status as elitists in this country. So I'm trying not to laugh, but he said, so I'm just telling you, I'm not going to cooperate. So Cindy and I look at each other, she's in the business too, and we're trying to not to laugh. And so we said, all right, that's cool. He said, what? I said, yeah, that's cool. You do this thing, it's civil disobedience. That's what you're talking about, right? He says, yeah, civil disobedience. It's just like, race rights and equal justice and all that stuff. And I said, that's really cool. Have you read Martin Luther King? He said, well, not a lot. And I said, well, you should read some of his stuff, because he says, it ain't really worthwhile unless you pay the dues. If you disobey and they say, oh, that's okay, you go on your way, that's not civil disobedience. You got to pay the dues. You got to get beat up sometimes. You got to get arrested. You go to jail. You lose money. That's civil disobedience, just to let you know. So that means for us, son, if you make this decision, I'm sort of proud of that. But when the teacher calls, we're handing the phone to you. You talk to the teacher or the principal or whatever. Okay. So sure enough, we get the call from the teacher. Could you guys come in? We need to talk about Ross's grade. It's really important. So we go in, and I remember it was 9 o'clock at night, and this poor guy, we're in a district like this, lots of money, lots of elitism and all that stuff. Not trying to be insulting, but just the way it works out. So, and this guy's, he's got the shadow, and he's exhausted, his tie's down. And so he's going over the paperwork. He said, I want to talk to you about Ross's grade. And we said, well, what is it? And he said, well, if I did it by the numbers, he'd be getting an F. And the guy stares at the floor, like waiting to get beaten up. And we looked at each other and said, well, what did he earn? The guy said, well, he didn't do any work. I said, yeah, I'm hip to that. So he earned an F, right? He said, yeah. And I said, okay. And the teacher looked at me and said, you're okay. I give him an F. And I said, absolutely. He said, that means he gets tracked out of the gifted program, which means he doesn't get all the enrichment and all the, stuff. I said, yeah, I know, but that's his decision. I said, if Ross earned an A, I'd be in your face about the grade. If he earns an F, I'd be in your face if you gave him an A. Because I'm in this great school district because I want Ross to learn stuff. And the primary thing I want him to learn is there's consequences to actions and decisions. And I want him to get that early before it could kill him later in life. So please give him the F. And the teacher put down his pencil and he squeezed, the chair goes back. And he shakes his head. He said, I've been teaching here for 9 years. You're the first set of parents that did not argue for a better grade for their kid or threaten to bring in a lawyer and to go to the principal. Yeah. And we looked at each other and said, oh my God, has this gotten off the track? Guys, failure is therapeutic. In the proper dose, if it's not going to kill them, you want them to fail. Because that's how they learn. Do not bail them out. They make a decision, there has to be consequences. So you get caught doing 120 miles an hour on the turnpike, does the judge say, oh, don't worry about it, not a problem. It's okay, I don't want to crush your spirit. Where's the district attorney? Do you do that a lot? Do you, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay. I know you're a nice kid. I go home. It doesn't work like that. It's not the way the world works. What are we preparing them for? How come they get so crushed when they run into the nice district attorney who says, I ain't your parent, kid. This is the way it works. This is the way of the world. Then when they hit that wall, they don't have the resilient skills to handle it. They're crushed. They collapse on the floor because they're not used to failing. Next, they're withdrawing from life into screens. Jean has a book out called, and I always get it mixed up with an article she wrote, but it's something like, have smartphones destroyed a generation of teenagers? And if you punch, there was an article in the New Yorker magazine, and the book is just out, and it's a great book, and it's a frightening book. She goes into great detail about the screen effect on the resilience of teenagers. Read it. You really need to read it. She comes up with all sorts of examples of how kids are disengaging from real life, and we're celebrating it because we don't get it. What are the examples of that? Well, sexual activity, kids having intercourse and creating babies, is down. What could be bad about that, right? Do you know why that's a problem? Because they're having cyber sex. They're not having real relationships. Not that I want kids having sex, getting diseases, making babies, but they've stopped in great numbers having real relationships. It's all phone sex, cyber sex. That's the relationship. Second is driving. Kids are crashing cars less, right? Everybody's excited about that. Oh, driver's ed is working. No, they're driving less. They're real happy to have mom and dad be Uber, because driving a car is a hassle. You got to take the test, you got to learn how to drive. Do you remember turning 16? If you guys are even remotely close to my age, that was like the golden grail, was getting your driver's license. Seriously, the day I turned 16, I was up at 3 in the morning so I could get down to the driver's place and take that test. That's all we talked about for years, right? Like, oh my God. And I've had a lot of exotic cars. I've had every great car you could think of. My brother and I are nuts about cars. You know my best car? A 1963 Corvair. It was listed as the most dangerous car in the world by Ralph Nader. This car had no, if you went through a puddle, I'd tell my date, you got to pick your feet up, because there was no floor. The water would come flying through the floor. I had wood floorboards on there. The thing almost killed me on a number of occasions in 10 different ways. It would pump carbon monoxide into the cabin. I had these raging headaches every day I got to school. And a teacher finally sent me to the nurse. He said, there's something wrong. Your face is beet red. You can't hold your eyes open. And in any event, that's the best car I ever owned. I've had Corvettes and Porsches and BMWs, never got the feeling I got from that 63 Corvair. Best car in the world. Why? I earned it. I went out and worked every crummy job you can think of to save enough money for that car. So I repeated that research. They compared kids who were given the keys to brand new cars and kids who earned their own crummy 63 Corvair. Guess which kids were happier 6 months later? Kids who earned their own car. Isn't that wild? Yeah. Think about these things, guys. Think about this stuff as you parent your child through these gates. Okay. The other thing that's happening is drugs. Guys, listen, I'm happy to fight with you. I would start out by making the observation, one of my areas of expertise is substance abuse in teenagers. I would rather your kid walk in my door addicted to alcohol than your kid walk in addicted to marijuana. Why is that? Marijuana doesn't leave the poison impact on the kid that alcohol does, or pills do. They can feel they're dying when they do those drugs. But weed, they don't get it. And weed steals a little bit of their soul, a piece at a time, over years. And it screws up their reward circuits. Remember I said their brains are attuned to rewards over risks? Well, is weed a neuroaddictive drug? Abso-frickin-lutely. Abso-frickin-lutely. Makes me outraged when people are saying, oh, you can't get addicted to weed. Of course you get addicted to weed. Addiction is not dependency. You can get dependent on coffee, and if you don't get the coffee, you're going to feel crummy for a few days, but if you don't take the coffee, then you're fine. Addiction is about how it makes you feel, how it manages your emotion. So what happens when kids start to use weed is that, let's say this is their level of reward chemical in the brain, typically dopamine primarily. So this is baseline. And then when they walk out in the morning, you walk out tomorrow morning, if it's a nice day, you get a little blip of dopamine. You're like, God, it's really beautiful today. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, you get a little blip. So that's what happens in life. When they smoke weed, teenagers, not adults necessarily, but teenagers get an explosion of that feel-good chemical. And they get it with alcohol as well. But again, the alcohol, they know, is killing. They're drinking less in some ways. They're onto that, but they claim weed is fine. Well, they get an explosion of the feel-good chemical. When they come down from the high, they don't stop at baseline. They go a little bit below, just a little bit. Sometimes they feel it. They'll say, oh, I'm kind of burnt out, I'm kind of crashed. But we can measure it. And that often makes them want to smoke again. And then they smoke again. When they smoke, they don't go up to the first high. And when they come down, they don't stop at baseline. They don't stop at the prior low point. They go a little bit lower. Everybody got this? Picture a descending roller coaster, and soon they're down here. And I have kids once a month will come into my office and say, I do nothing but smoke weed 24/7 nonstop. I hate it. I stink. I'm broke. My girlfriend dumped me. But I have to smoke to get through the day. So they're down here trying to get back to baseline. That does two things. One, when they're down here, they often switch to the next drug. So a friend will say, yeah, you get too much tolerance. Here, try this pill. Bam, they find Jesus again. Another explosion and another descending roller coaster. That typically ends with opioids and heroin, and that's the last stop on that train line. What's the other thing it does? It kills their reward circuits. Guys, when you get this explosion of dopamine over and over and over, the brain says we're getting overdosed. It stops its own production system. So after 6 months, a year of using a lot of weed, they walk out on that beautiful fall morning and they don't see it. It's all black and white, gray, because they don't get the payoffs from life anymore. Everybody with me? So when the kid walks in addicted to weed, I'm like, oh my God, I wish you went down the street to somebody else, because they have to go through hell of abstaining from the thing that brings them relief, while the reward circuits heal up, and then life can make them feel okay again. The science of marijuana and teenagers is very different than the science of marijuana and adults. I don't know much about adult science and weed. I suspect it's similar to alcohol, because at certain ages, the brain develops defenses against the neuroaddictive effects of drugs. And when you get to that point, it's really rare that somebody becomes an addict. It's really rare. What are the numbers like that explain this? Well, a recent study came out, a group called CASA did this incredibly wonderful, boring, horrible study to read, 417 pages. And I poured through it, myself and some other folks, and we broke out their data in a way that tells us the following. The younger somebody starts to use these drugs, the greater the odds of addiction. You may have seen the slide here. You start when you're young, they're talking about 4 times the rate of addiction. Well, let me put it in another picture for you. First, if you take a group of 25 young adults or kids, and they first start to use regularly, that means alcohol or marijuana once a week or more. So 25, 21-year-olds get together and they say, hey, we're 21, we can use, and they start to use. Of that group of 21-year-olds who never used before, one will become a full-blown addict to some drug, meaning the drug takes over their life. They lose jobs, family, they live to use the drug, okay, whatever the drug is. 1 out of 25. Oh, not too bad a risk, I guess, right? What about 18? At age 18, if 25 kids get together, say, hey, we're 18, we can die for our country, we can start to drink, we can start to use weed. Of those 25 18-year-olds, 3 will become full-blown addicts. Now, that's getting a little scary. What about at 16? Of 25 16-year-olds that first start to use regularly, 6 become full-blown addicts. Am I getting your attention? It's like every 4th in the group. What about at 14, less than 16, which is the average onset now in America, kids that start using regularly, of 25 14-year-olds, 17 of the 25 will become full-blown addicts. You all hearing me? So when you see parents that are laid back about, a kid does a little weed, what's the big deal? You're not getting it. You're not getting it. It's dangerous. Or the kid drinks a little bit. Sorry, you're not getting it. This is frickin' dangerous. Why is that? Their brains are incredibly vulnerable. Did I explain that to you? They're going through these changes where the brain is massively rewiring. It's very vulnerable. Just like seeing things and hearing things changes the brain behavior, so do these neuroaddictive substances. They can't do it, guys. They simply can't use. You can ask me when we get to Q&A, well, how the heck do you get them to stop? We'll talk about that. But the moral of the story is teenagers cannot use. The drug that they're using should be renamed. We've called it marijuana from forever. But the stuff you may have smoked as a teenager is 1/3 to 1/9 as potent as to what the kids are smoking today. So if you did 10 milligrams, your kid could be doing 90 milligrams every time they decide to use. It's an entirely different picture. But people don't get it because they're thinking about weed back in the day. So what is all this stuff, all these stressors doing to kids? It's an epidemic of mental health disorders. Guys, over that same 50-year period, The data show that anxiety and depression is up 500%. 500%. And not because we coddle the kids or we look for it more or any of that stuff. Gene's data are rock hard. These kids are suffering in record numbers that we see with returning deployed veterans. Very similar numbers. And what's the killer statistic? Since 1952 to 2016, 1952 we first started to collect data on suicide. Suicide in the general population is up 78%. That's like everybody. They're offing themselves at an increased rate. And that's the question a lot of people are looking at. Why do people kill themselves so much more now? Guys, in the same time frame, teenage suicide did not go up 78%, it went up 500%. To the point where if you come to this magnificent school tomorrow, click off every 5th kid, you have a child who in the past year either attempted suicide or had a serious plan to suicide, meaning they decided they didn't want to be around anymore and they had selected a method. I'm going to get dad's gun, I'm going to make a noose, I'm going to get the pills. Every 5th kid. It is an epidemic, and it is explained by all that data that I just went over. So how do you explain it? Brain-challenged creatures, and they've been brain-challenged from forever. We all were nuts too, as young teenagers. A culture that comes after them with an unprecedented amount of pounding to do crazy things, and the technology, the screens. We've given nuclear weapons to the terrorists. Watch out. And we are reaping the consequences of those decisions. That's what's happening. And the next thing that contributes to their dysfunction, and again, I'm talking too much, is that we're doing a lousy job as parents. Why are we doing a lousy job? We don't know what to do. Essentially, a lot of us are fighting this war with the rules from the old wars. It don't work. Essentially, it's a debate between using fear or using respect to try to parent kids through this. And parents get so confused, often they overreact, they go crazy with drug testing and screaming. Most parents in America still hit their kids, the dirty little secret, we never talk about that, but we do. And sometimes we hit them with things worse than our fists. We hit them with words, we call them names, we degrade them. You know, all in the name of helping them be better human beings. That's what we do. And most of us, we're raised that way ourselves. We call it fear-based methodology. Fear-based. So what is fear-based? That's where you go to their animal brain and set it on fire because they're terrified or they're in pain. But we really go to the back brain to try to get them to change. Guys, and this gets us to the mission aspect. What is your mission? Is your mission to control your kid? Or is your mission to teach your child to control herself? What is it you want to achieve? So there's the camp that says, let's use fear. There was a great expert in fear-based parenting a long time ago, very accomplished. A lot of people have heard about him. His name was Peter Joseph Bradley. He was my father, Irish Catholic. And he was great on fear-based parenting. And one time he was very worried about us succumbing to cultural prompts. And he heard us in his basement, as he referred to us, with my gangster friends, as he referred to them. And we were listening to the devil's music. Anybody want to guess what the devil's music was in 1967? Anybody who was here this morning can't answer. Not the Beatles, not Hendrix, not Stones, not Elvis, not Pink Floyd, not Dylan. It's stunning. All over America, people don't get this. This morning, a woman did get it. I don't know if she's here again tonight. Anybody else want to guess? Who? Not the Beach Boys. They were nuts, but their music was kind of... I'm sorry? Who said it? The Doors. Who said, stand up, please. Come on, take your... The Doors. Come on, make her stand up. Come on, come on. All right, both of you stand up. Come on. Come on. The Doors. Oh, my God. Yeah, well, most of you are confused because you're younger and you know the Doors, the little love ditties, and aren't they sweet songs? The Doors were a sick bunch of puppies, in case you didn't know that. And if you don't believe that, go home and punch up their original album the English lyrics and listen to a song called The End. I will not say anything further. My father heard us listening to The End, and he came downstairs to work with us to help us kind of understand the cultural prompts. He had a cigar in mouth, and he takes a cigar out. He always had a cigar. Picks up the album. Remember albums? Smashes it on the record player. It's really effective. It's like shrapnel, all over the room. Puts a cigar back in his mouth, takes a drag, and blew smoke in our wide-eyed faces, waiting for somebody to be dumb enough to say something, which we did not, because of the neighborhood rule, Southwest Philadelphia. Anybody's parent can beat up anybody's kid. I'm not making that up, by the way. I still have a knot to this day. The Polish lady laid me out with a frying pan. I didn't think she understood English, but she knew the curse words really good. So in any event, that was kind of the way it went down, in any event. So then he puts his hands on his hips, and he's towering over us. And back then, the old man was like 13 feet, 8 inches tall. Remember how big your father used to look? And then he storms back up the steps, muttering and cursing to himself. Do you think that was an effective parent intervention? Before you laugh and say no, it sort of was. It sort of was. Do you know what an album cost in relative dollars in '67? Nobody had any discretionary income. We had to scour the city to find that album because nobody would carry it. It was so crazy. Nobody would carry it. And guess what? You couldn't get it on the radio. Why not? There used to be something called decency laws. Yeah, remember that we used to laugh at those people. They're so silly, Decency laws. They said, well, if it's public access, kids might hear this stuff and be influenced by it. Hello, civil libertarians? What are we going to do? I don't know. I don't have the answer for you. I sure know about the problem. Decency laws. So that was the end of the Doors' influence on me and my gangster friends for quite a while. Nobody else had the album. It wasn't on the radio. So it was like off into college before I heard that. Yeah, I remember that. It worked to police a child's environment. You go home today and your daughter's listening to a horrendous MP3 and you erase it from her smartphone, what will she do? And 2 more that are worse. Yeah, just to show you, and you're never going to know it. You're never going to out-tech your kids. Sorry, you may be a tech genius at work. Your kid's better at it. Just trust me. You're not going to beat the kid at the tech game. It just doesn't work. And fathers in general are wedded to this because they say, look, my father used to beat me up, and my coach slapped me around, my drill sergeant slapped me around. What's wrong with being a tough father? That's important. So when the dads say that to me, I'll say, look, tell me about your own father. Almost every time they'll say, well, the old man worked 2 jobs to get us through school, never had a decent pair of shoes in his life, took care of the widow family down the street, blah, blah, blah. And I say, thank you. What a wonderful story. You just told me about the man's values and his character. Sir, you never mentioned the hitting. You forgave the hitting. You overlooked the fear stuff the guy did because you admired the heart of the man. The drill sergeant, the coach, the father. You get the drill? It ain't fear. It's something called respect. What's that look like? My son is in my basement with his gangster friends, and they're listening to his devil's music. And the devil's music is the rap stuff, which the misogynist, violent lyrics. So they were downstairs listening to this, and this was a while ago, circa 2004, I guess, 2003. And I go downstairs, and they shut off the CD players. I'm coming down the steps. Remember CD players? Yeah, CDs, yeah. So, so I say, gentlemen, and they're all doing this. As gentlemen, we need to turn that on. I'm not taking your CD, and I don't even want to know whose it is. The price we pay is we listen to it together, okay? And they all look at each other. We turn it on, and he said a lot of interesting things about the psychology of females that I missed in school. But the prominent one was women like to be beaten. Guys, did you know that? If you want your women to feel good, beat them up. And I know this is true because I heard this artist saying it, and he's an authority. Yeah, and the refrain of this song back then, it's probably still around, and there's worse ones, says you should beat her because they feel loved. And the refrain is, and I always mess this up, but she's screaming, she screams and she squeals, she pleads and she begs, but she loves it, she loves it, she loves it. I turn off the CD player. I said, gentlemen, to these boys, Do you think women like getting beaten up? And they look at each other like, well, that's a dumb question. Why asking me that? And I said, well, you guys are listening to this. I'm just curious. I don't know. I never thought about it. We just, like the music. I said, well, do you think that what you guys see and hear can affect your behavior? Nah, what you see and hear can't make you do nothing. I'll be right back, I said. And I used to teach a class, the smoking study, the AMA. I said, look at this. The more people teenagers see somebody smoking on a screen, they start cigarettes. Yeah, well, maybe that's true, but that wouldn't make anybody beat up a girl. I said, really? I'll be right back. And I have another graph. And this one shows the relationship between these violent, misogynist lyrics and sexual violence against young females. It's almost an absolute correlation. We never get that in data. It's just like, holy mackerel, look at this. So do you think that this is related? It's not causation, it is correlation. However, look at it. What do you think? My son hated it when I did this stuff. One time he said, why don't you just punch me in the face and get it over with? He did. It's an Irish thing. I said, Ross, I would love to punch you in the face and get it over with. I'd feel all manly. I'd get back to my football game a lot faster. And I said to the boys, gentlemen, think about this. If I tuned up my son in front of you guys, what would I do? I would enrage, embarrass, and humiliate him in front of his good friends. I would be pushing him in the direction of that madman on your CD player who I consider to be my enemy. He's my enemy. He's poisoning people with stuff at a young age that makes them do bad things. So gentlemen, in the military, the first lesson I learned, and the best, is never start a fight you can't win. Gentlemen, I said, I can't control your culture. I can shut off your CD player, but I know you're going to turn it back on. The minute I'm gone, this stuff rains back on your head. And this is before the screens hit, by the way they have. But I know the culture will win. Gentlemen, never start a fight you can't win. I can't win this fight. The enemy is through my wire. They're over my walls. We got to get the hell out of here, figure out something better to do to win the fight. I said, I don't care about your culture because I can't control what you see and hear, guys. What I care about is what you think about what I know you see and what I know you're hearing. And on that point, I've invited Ross's mother downstairs to join us and to enlighten us from a female perspective as to whether women enjoy being beaten up. And now they're going, What am I doing? Guys, I can't control their culture. Neither can you. I do what you want. If you think that's getting the fight done, it ain't. It ain't. We have to go over their beliefs. That's the core of respect-based parenting, teaching, intervention, therapy. Change a belief, you change the person. Change a person, you change the community. Because those guys might have gone into school, and when some guy was bragging about bitch slapping his girlfriend, and you know that girls brag about being slapped? Yeah, you haven't read that one? They brag. It's like a red badge of courage that their boyfriend slapped them. It's cool. They'll post this stuff. So I said, maybe you'll be sitting at the table and you'll hear some guy bragging about how he slapped his girlfriend, and maybe one of you guys will say, man, that's not funny. That's not cool. What's up with you? Why would you do that? You can change things if you want, or not, it's up to you. But you change a belief in your kid, you change the person. Guys, think about in the park, at the party, when the drugs roll out, and by the way, a lot of the parents roll out the drugs. Alcohol, marijuana for the kids. A lot of the parents do this, parents you would not suspect, because they think they're being good parents to keep the kid from doing drugs and driving. They're not doing drugs on the street. At least I know they're safe, all this kind of stuff. It's crazy. I just came from a school in Manhattan, elite school, gazillion dollars a year, and gave this presentation. And a woman said, if you're telling me I have to tell my daughter she can't smoke weed, she won't have a social life because all her friends smoke and half the parents smoke with them. Yeah. It's kind of all morphing like, I'm not sure I'm awake hearing these kind of arguments, and that's what's going on. Guys, think about your kid when the drugs are rolled out. Which is the safe kid? The kid says, I can't use, my parents will kill me. That's not the safe kid. That becomes a game. How do I use and they don't find out? You played that game. I certainly did. The safe kid is the one who says, I don't do that stuff, thanks. How do you get there? By going after belief systems with respect-based techniques, not terror, but by trying education and relationship stuff. This is not easy, but it works, and it's the only thing that works. So using the respect-based techniques is demanding, because it means we have to be better people than them. We have to work on our own emotions. We have to be in charge of ourselves. Now that I've told you, you can't snap out and scream at your kid, after you do snap out and scream at your kid, apologize. You're a human being. You have limits. You will lose it. You go back in and say, I'm sorry. Apology does not have the word but in it. Does not have the phrase, you got to understand. That ain't an apology. Apology in football is a receiver that walks back to the huddle and goes like this, my bad. Doesn't scream at the quarterback or anybody, my bad. That's a big thing to do, and it teaches kids how to handle those sorts of situations. Okay, now, talk too much again. You have a couple of handouts. You don't need to go over them today, but I do want you to read them. You have there a set of strategies and tactics. The strategies are the 7 C's of resilience. 7 C's. Those are the overall strategies, and I gave you a bunch of examples of things to do to build resilience in kids. So the research shows that these are the core concepts of building resilience. By the way, if you ask me to name the most important C, that would be connections. Connections. Does that ring a bell? Remember the 2 vets? Each lost a leg. Which one came back to the surface after the trauma? The one that was involved with other people. Talking to the other vets. His family was in. Fiancé was in. It's connections. It's the same for your teenager, guys. If you use fear, judgment, screaming, yelling, that sort of stuff, you will lose your connection to the heart of your kid. It's all about maintaining the connection, and then they will listen to what you have to say. It's not a guarantee, but it's the best way to proceed. And then the tactics are the 10 commandments of parenting, another handout. I want to hit the first C, and we will get you out of here at 9 o'clock for the babysitters going into overtime. The first C is thou shalt be as a dispassionate cop unto thy child and adolescents. What does that mean? This is how to do discipline. Think about 2 cops. You go through a stop sign, and one cop pulls you over, and he's arrogant and insulting and frightening you and says, yeah, Miss Jones, I see you're on your way to school. Well, you're going to be really late now. I'll get back to you when I feel like it. And he goes back in the car, and he's sipping coffee, and you're getting later and later and later. So when you get, and he walks up and he throws the ticket in the window, and his gas pedal gets stuck, did it? And he's got you frightened and angry and upset. What do you tell your partner about when you get home that night? Crazy cop. He shouldn't have a gun. There's something wrong with him, and I'm going to write a letter. The next morning, you go through the same stop sign. Another cop pulls you over. Her delivery is a little bit different. She says, Miss Jones, I can see you're a teacher. I know you're late at the school. Get you out of here as soon as I can. And she writes up the same ticket, comes back, presentation is different. Miss Jones, I get to pick up body parts at this intersection once every few months. I'd rather not be picking up yours. You can't be going through stop signs. It is better to get there late than not at all. Please think about this. I hope the rest of your day is better than this. Hands you the same ticket, same point, same fine, and leaves. What are you thinking about? Who are you mad at when the first cop terrifies you? The cop. Who are you mad at when the second cop says, I hope the rest of your day is better than this? Got it? Mad at yourself. Guys, that's the key to psychological change, getting pissed off at yourself. So when you are disciplining kids, always use consequences. You got a consequence from the smart cop because she knew you knew the law. You knew you go through stop signs, you're going to pay the price. She didn't make it up. She's trying to keep you alive. She's giving you the consequence. So always use consequences, like with drugs and alcohol. So the first time your kid comes home drunk, sorry, it will happen. What is a proper punishment? There ain't none. What is punishment? That's the first cop. I'm going to hurt you for being hurtful. That just makes you angry at the person administering justice. Consequence is the second cop. Hey, I didn't make this up. We agreed as a culture. This is what happens. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Pay your ticket. You're going to have points on your record. Sorry about that. But maybe you'll slow down. Which cop makes you think about your own behavior more? You got the drill of this? All about consequences. So what do you do with a kid who comes home drunk? You don't scream and yell. Well, if it's 2 in the morning, that's what you're going to do. So don't do parenting. If your kid is safe, if she can talk and her gait is okay, you think she's just a little bit too much, well, you're going to have to stay up with her, sorry, because a lot of these kids take other drugs that wear off, the amphetamines, and then the full effects of the alcohol hit, and they can vomit in their sleep, they stop breathing, all sorts of things. So if you want to take the chance, do the night watch. I'm an advocate of taking them to the emergency room. If you have any doubt, take them to the ER. The ER staff will be really pissed off at your kid because they deal with like really serious issues, and they're going to say, you know, what an idiot, I can't believe you did this. That's another life lesson, you know, at the ER at 2 a.m. In any event, the next day you do the parenting. And what do? You start off by saying, tell me what you learned. Your kid will say, what? Tell me what you learned. And this is the first offense. You might strike gold, and even if she doesn't say it, it'll be in her head that the stuff tastes awful and kids got crazy and there was fights and people were puking. They might say, you know, it's really kind of stupid, Mom. Well, you hit the gold. That's great. Then the kid says, so what's my punishment? You say, oh, we don't do that. The kid says, great, I'm headed back to the park tonight. You say, sit down. What if it happens again? Never happen again, Mom. I'll never drink again. I'd like to hear that. What should we do if it happens again? I don't know, I guess you should ground me. I don't like that. I'll tell you what. Can we say that you can earn the privilege of going to the park or going to the sleepovers, which is where this happens all the time. You can earn that privilege by not using again. And if you do use again, can we agree you're just not ready for that level of freedom? You're a great kid. You're a smart kid. It's just tough to make those decisions. I get that. So if it happens again, let's retire sleepovers for the next 3 months. Can we agree on that? What? I can't have sleepovers? No, sweetie. I'm just trying to hurt you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Have the sleepovers here. I'll buy the pizza and the movies and all that stuff. What do you say? Well, the kids won't come here. Why is that? Why is that? Do you get the drill? The louder you get and the scarier you get, the less powerful you become. So always set up the consequence for the next infraction. You put the power in the kid's hands, and she determines the outcome of her future. That's how you parent. I'm going to shut up because we got to get some Q&A and then wrap up. So who would like to argue or, yes sir, nice and loud please, we got a big group.
Are you familiar with the work of psychologist Peter Gray, whose book Free to Learn and the Concept of Sudbury Schools? It relates a lot to
I'm sorry, can you slow down a little bit?
It's a little bit of time left. Psychologist Peter Gray, I've read his book called Free to Learn.
Okay.
How to reform the school system. And you said something about excessive expectations being put on kids. I attended this school a while back, and I had excessive expectations placed on me. So I'm a big advocate now for Sudbury schools, which go a long way to giving kids more freedom and responsibility. Are you familiar with any of that?
With the concept, yes.
Can you say something nice about it to these lovely people?
Okay. I think I already did. Do you hear what everything I went over? The whole point is taking the focus off of kids trying to soak up data and spit it, which is really what AP courses are, with rare exceptions. It's about their exercises in mass memorization, not thinking. The goal is the thinking. Guys, it's not the product, it's the process. We don't really care what kids do. I know it's easy for me to say about your kids, but I've done this with my son, and it killed me because I prize things like education and degrees and all that stuff. But I believe my own stuff. I believe my own research. And Ross did all this crazy stuff, and parents would roll their eyes when we didn't send him off to the enrichment programs. He has the heart of a lion. He's an amazing, amazing guy. When we went through crises, we're still going through crises with Sarah, at age 8, because I started this when he was very young, at age 8, we had we were all exhausted with Sarah screaming and We felt hopeless. And we were sitting there, and Ross said, "Give her back." Yeah, he did. We were all tearing up. We were just exhausted. We finally got her. And Ross said, "You have to take her back. You're not the same, and Mom's not the same, and she's miserable. You have to give her back." And I couldn't talk. I was so choked up. And then, as we sat there, I had tears coming out of my eyes. Ross, without a word being spoken, says, "We can't give her back. If we give her back, who will feed her? Who will love her?" He had the heart of a lion. And I realized all these things where I just, would let him make decisions, structure his own learning, not care what he did. As long as he did something, I didn't care what it was. That was it. It was like a gift from God or whatever, if you believed in that. It was like, oh man, this is right. And he has the heart of a lion today, not killer. He's just the most amazing human being. I am in awe of him. This stuff works, guys. Stop getting locked into the product, the A's and AP and all this. Look at the process. Be sure your kid does something. Never allow a kid to do no thing. Be sure they're engaged in something, even if you think it's a waste of time. They're learning. They're making decisions. The gears are churning, and they will mature. Yes, ma'am. Nice and loud for the back.
Do you have any suggestions on managing phone screens?
Yeah, what I do is, like, I leave it, my wife takes it at night, and then I can sleep.
I have 2 kids in high school, and we do have a rule in our house that they have to plug in their phones at 10 o'clock.
Right.
But it's often a struggle, and the 16-year-old's going to go to college, so he has to be able to do that and put the screen down on his own. So it's balancing his self-control with our control.
Great question. Did everybody hear that? Okay, it's like, what do you do? Because at some point they go off to college, and then have they learned how to self-regulate is the word that they use. So you view that again as a process. First of all, kids can't have the phone in the bedroom. So if push comes to shove, if the kid is addicted, and yes, you get addicted to these things, you may have to remove it for a period of time so he can think and not get depressed and anxious. However, you're always trying to get the kid to be able to self-regulate. That's your mission. So you're always doing these things with, well, let's try this. I'll tell you what, I won't come and get your phone, but can you agree to plug it in at 10? Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's do that for a week, and then let's see how you do. And by the way, the phones, you can see the activity now, so you can see that he was on at 2 a.m. You say, oh, we had a rough week. So what do we do the second week? Well, I don't know, maybe you just have to, I don't know, do something to get the phone away from me. I say, well, I would like to do that, but I'd rather you surrender the phone so that you can learn how to hang it up when you're away. So I'll tell you what, I will pay you $50 at the end of the week if you're able to shut it down at 10 o'clock at night. What do you say? Or get you the concert tickets or the skis or whatever. Yeah. Then you roll into the third week. Rough week, we weren't able to do it. What are you doing? You're doing increasing levels of intrusion into their lives, but always hoping they get it. Always hoping. Because every day that you play these games, their brain is wiring. Remember, Mother Nature's on your side. You pay the dues at 13, but then every day you get through, they're getting smarter. Their ability to think, level of insight increases. So you're playing for time, hoping they learn from their failures. Because one of the things you can say is, wow, you really wanted those concert tickets, didn't you? Yeah. You have to give them to me. No, we made an agreement. I'm sorry about that, but I just have a question for you, son. How is it that you can't hang up the phone and you wanted to go to the Made in America concert? What happened there, man? You're trying to get them to think about, my God, maybe it is a problem. So use that paradigm. We're increasing levels. You may get to the point where I got to shut it down, put it on the timer, but that's an emergency intervention. You're always trying to help the kid learn to make better decisions under their own power, the self-regulation. Yes, sir?
Why are we not fully transformed?
You mean, are there 50-year-old, 14-year-olds? Yeah, absolutely. Sure. That happens. And by the way, the drugs are a big part of that. Regular drug use, overusing, paralyzes kids. And they become 50 years old and they're 14. It really shuts down. Addicts miss chunks of social emotional development. They just lost it. They can pick it up again if they stop using. But some people who are addicted to various things can be drugs, alcohol, women, cars, speeding, gambling, you name it. It shuts down their development, and it can really make them incredibly immature. When does the brain wiring stop? When does it finally wire in? 25. The bulk is over at about 21. Critical parts are wired in by 18. You've got wires to work with. But it keeps going. By the way, another female rule over the centuries, well, recent past, guys are all nuts till they're 25. They're all about chasing women and football and motorcycles and beer, and it's largely true. And don't get serious with a guy until he's at least 25. And then the brain scans came up and said, son of a gun, it finishes at 25. Yes, ma'am?
I have freshman girls, and the provocative pictures that are all over, you know, they're like, oh, you know, they understand when we say Snapchat goes away, but it doesn't really. So they get that it's still out there. But the friends and the pictures that go around every day,
Yep.
and you don't want to talk about their body image, and I just some ammunition to use that might send a message that, you know, you don't really want to be that person.
Did you all hear the question? Talking about the sexting that's going on in record numbers. It's stunning. What happens is the girls are being pressured by the culture to be sexual at early ages, and they're convinced that sex is power and control over males, and they use it that way. And that's when they do the sexting stuff, and it is kind of another epidemic. So what do you do about that? Again, go after the belief system. If you can get a hold of one of the pictures, because they think that Snapchat means nobody else except boyfriend will see the picture, you know that's ridiculous, right? They just screenshot the thing and then they send it out to everybody. If you can get a hold of one without screaming and yelling, saying, sweetie, I don't want to make you feel bad, but you know, this picture, how would you feel about your 13-year-old daughter seeing this picture? How will that go over? So that's like trying to get the adult brain, which thinks about the future, to come online. The problem is they don't have sexual values when they're 13. That comes later with the wiring. That's like 17, 18, 19, sometimes later when they start to say, you know something, I think sex should be about something else too, the women. So you have to try to calmly use these sort of techniques. You may have to take the phone, because she is creating a tragedy for herself at some point. But try the future orientation. Always say, when you're a parent, how will you feel? And by the way, this is out there forever. You can't, what was the cyber tattooing? A gentleman came up with this term, cyber tattooing. Actually, I came up with it. I told him that term. It's a great term, because it is out there forever. Last question, then I'll wrap. Yes, absolutely.
So, but your answer seemed to be...
Now, talking about the damage aspect, the boys can sex and they're cool. Girls, we still, same old, even in this new culture. Girls today have two choices in terms of sexual identity. You can be a prude and you can be a slut. What would you like to be? Boys can do this stuff and there's no backlash. They don't get the judgments. They don't suffer emotionally from sexting. The girls do. Same old, same old. But yes, you need to address it with the boys as well. The boys typically are sharing the pictures of the girls, not the inverse. That doesn't happen as much. So it tends to be a process where girls are victimized further. That's why we put the focus on that. Okay, final wrap up. We'll get you out of here. The last commandment, this too shall pass. Guys, I want you leaving here a little upset, a little worried. You play your best game when you're a little worried. I don't want you leaving terrified. Amazingly, most kids get through this crazy culture. Notice that I said 1 out of 5 crashes with a serious situation. 4 make it through. How the hell do they get through? I don't know. I would not have survived this culture as a teenager. You know, but I do know how they get through. You know how? You guys. Of all the influences we talked about, you know what the most powerful influence is over a teenager today? Parents. Do you believe that? About half the time I didn't. I was like, there's no way this can be true. But in fact, your kids are most influenced by who you are, how you conduct yourself, not what you tell them to do. They're watching you, they're drinking it in. How do you handle conflict with your spouse? How do you handle the jerk that cuts you off? How do you handle failure? What do you do about apologizing for your failures? Do you man up, woman up, and own the thing to your kid and apologize, even though she started it with effing you off and you effed back? You go in and apologize for your half of it. They're drinking that in. Guys, you have all the power. A couple of quick points. One, be sure that you're focusing on their heart, not their GPA, not their batting average. It's all about the heart. It's about values, characters, beliefs, character system. That's the goal. It's about who they are. When that morphs in, when it becomes solid, you can't stop them from achieving. The research is really clear. The other way around does not work. They have to figure out who they are, what they want to do in the world. It's about purpose and passion. Focus on that. Pick your battles. Think about the airports, yellow, orange, red alert. What's in the yellow alert basket with teenagers? Messy rooms, weird clothes, strange hair. Don't go there, not worth fighting. What's in the orange alert basket? Grades. You do what you can. You say, look, how about if I throw in an incentive, we'll pay you for the work. You don't go to war over that. You never go to war over that. It's not worth it, trust me. You redline, the red alert is primarily the drugs. That cannot happen. That's where you fire up and say, with love, this can't happen. You bookend with love. Son, I love you. This stuff can take you out. We may disagree on it. You can't use. I love you too much to be cool with it. If you don't get crazy with the messy room and the bad grades, they're arrested by your intensity when you say, this one's not going to happen on my watch. Sorry. What's the safe amount of drugs for a kid to do until they're 21? 0. So what do? You tell your kid, it's my expectation. You will do no drugs. Does that mean your kid won't do drugs? Sorry. They are going to experiment. But the research is really clear that parents who have a firm, loving conviction expressed to their kid as an expectation, those kids use far less. They're much, much safer. It doesn't give you the control you may be looking for, but it works. Did this with Ross. When he was going off to college, he said, Dad, you really expect me not to drink? You know what goes on in college. I said, unfortunately, I do. I train in those places. I know it's nuts. Yes, son, it's my expectation you won't drink. And he kind of laughed, walked off. Years later, he came back, like 2 years later, and said, remember when you told me that when I was leaving for school? And I said, yeah. He said, you ruined my high. I said, what are you talking about? He said, every time there was booze in front of me, your face popped up. I freaking hated that. Guys, that's the drill. Doesn't mean he won't drink or she won't drink, but it limits the behavior. That's the power and the gold, and that's the way you approach it. Finally, remember what your real mission is. Your mission is not to be the parent that raises an Ivy League freshman. Your mission is to raise the parents of your grandchildren. Raising the parents of your grandchildren. That's what this is about. This is as close as you get to touching the face of infinity, because your kids are taking in what you do. What do you want to pass down? What do you want the heirloom to be? Anger, pressure, failed expectations, judgment, coldness? How about things like compassion, empathy, calmness, especially in the face of provocation? How do you want to see them handling your grandchildren when your grandchildren are making them crazy because the grandchildren are now 13? What do you want to see? This is really important, guys. What do you want to pass down? I'll tell you my 2 best tricks. One is called the deathbed exercise. I can't get it published anywhere. They say it needs a new name, but it works. Before I'm about to go nuts on my kids back in the day over something like messy rooms and so forth, I would think about being on my deathbed. Say, when I'm on my deathbed reviewing my life, how will I feel about what I am about to do right now? It's like, got it, thank you. go in and play the heart. Sarah, give me a hug. Missed you while I was away. Real proud of you. She was a rugby player. I know you played. You were hurt. That was amazing. That was just incredible, girl. Just love you. Missed you to death. And by the way, for the 10,000th time, maybe you could help me clean up the Chinese food boxes in the family room, kind of a thing. So you focus on what's important. Last tip for you is humor. Guys, humor is the last defense against madness. Ask soldiers, ask cops in bad neighborhoods, and parents of teenagers when they're acting out. It's about humor. It helps you ward off the insanity. My wife and I have a cartoon that got us through a lot of dark days hanging on the wall. And it's two middle-aged parents on opposing couches reading books. And the husband raises his head and says to his wife, "You know, sweetheart, now that our kids are all in jail, maybe we can finally take that trip we always planned." Good luck out there, guys. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you.